My VO2 max is now superior. Now what this means is that I am a part of the big elite that has superior VO2 max. VO2 max is a measure that is used to kind of predict longevity, even though it is not probably a causal relation, but only a correlation. Now, the journey of me having now a superior VO2 max goes back a very long way. I was active as a child, then I picked up running at 12, and then fast forward to now, where I only run about once a week, but I also sometimes run to the gym. But I have been consistently running, and I also was able in the last 4 weeks to increase the duration of my runs again to higher lengths. So it's not necessarily the duration itself, but the distance. Of course, I was able to push the distance further. And overall, I think it has not been an increase. My VO2 max is still only 55. So 55 is still the number that shows actually in Garmin. And as I actually took a look at Garmin today, I noticed that it had now a different color, and this color now is purple. Purple, I think, stands for superior, and this is what I've been working for so long. And I don't wanna. I mean, the thing. It seems to be kind of this thing that you don't talk about things that are hard, and if then people talk about things that are hard, because most people seem to hide the struggles, then you're kind of using a societal advantage, because most people hide these things, and then you're kind of using this and in order to get attention, it seems. But I want to also, maybe to my future self, acknowledge that it was kind of really hard as I introduced these interval sessions. So before these interval sessions, and I have heard about these interval sessions in Peter Attia's book Outlive, and I've heard about them before already, and I also did them already as a teenager. So I've heard about them like years ago in running books already, that I should do interval training sessions for 400 and for 800 meters, for example, to introduce a higher intensity into my training, apart from the normal running I would do every second day. So I began at about age 11 or 12, running first every day and then every second day. And I would alternate between running I would alternate between weightlifting and running, and I picked this up at 11 or 12. Now, I additionally would layer swimming on top of this. I would also have school sports on top of this. I would also climb on top of this. But running and lifting was kind of the basic training I did for years. Now I run kind of on a different schedule. I run only once a week, and I weightlift 3 times a week. And in between, I have one bike ride, which has now been morphed into an air bike ride, but previously this was actually the swimming part. I just couldn't find a solution for me being able to swim without the pool being too crowded all year round, because in summer you could potentially swim outdoors, and in winter you need to swim indoors somewhere. I mean, you could potentially also use a river outdoors in winter, and there are people who do this, and I've already seen these people when I was a child, that they just go out and then they swim in lakes and rivers when it's winter, and this already has been kind of a tradition, at least where I come from. But even though my cold exposure training has put me probably in a category of people who are able to do this, I'm still not comfortable with just going out and swimming for 30 minutes in a cold river in winter that has a couple of degrees Celsius. So I'm still not that comfortable, even though it was an idea I tried to pursue, but I just couldn't push myself to do this. So swimming for now is usually indoors, and this meant that the pool is usually crowded, and then there is this constraint that you try to push your own intensity, and then there are other people who are slower. Some people are even faster, because I'm a pretty bad swimmer, and well, I think swimming would be really beneficial, but it did not work out. So I now do interval sessions on Tuesdays. I do an air bike session that is 40 minutes, where I try to push into zone 4 at least. I once had a zone 5 for I think 80 or 90% of the time, which was kind of the best thing in terms of this air biking I ever achieved. But I also picked up air biking only when our gym actually, or my gym actually, it's not my gym, but the gym I attend actually got an air bike. Now, I then on Saturdays do another kind of weightlifting session that is also mixed maybe with a little bit more freestyle training, and on Sundays I run, and that's kind of the schedule. Now, the schedule I've ran for the last year. Now, before this, I had a different schedule, which was pretty similar to this, apart from a few minor changes. And then, if we go back, the only difference between all of these different schedules is mostly that I switched in the days and I switched in the one or the other sessions. But I usually was weightlifting 3 times a week since I was 12, or more than this, but on average 3.5. It depends. I mean, and at first I had basically 2 different weeks because I switched. Because if you do things every day and the week has 7 days, then you switch every second week to another schedule. And I've been running since I was 12. I've been weightlifting since I was 12. And I have not been particularly good at both. Now, in 2022, I got a Garmin. I already had the Galaxy Watch 4 before. I also had a Galaxy Active before, the 2. And before this, I only had a Galaxy Fit. Galaxy Fit, I think it is called. And of course there is no VO2 Max on the Galaxy Fit, but there is a VO2 Max calculation on Samsung. So this appeared in, I think, late 2021. I saw for the first time, or maybe already before, I saw a VO2 Max calculation in Samsung Health. Now, this VO2 Max calculation, and this is kind of the first VO2 Max calculation I got. Now, what also has to be said is that this isn't a proper VO2 Max measurement. And so it could actually be that I run equivalent to somebody who on average has a VO2 max like this, but I run actually more efficiently or less efficiently, so maybe I actually do not have a VO2 max like this. But what the value was in Samsung was like, I think from anywhere from 51 to 52 and then 53. These had been the values, or have been the values in Samsung Health, beginning, or basically in the winter months of 2022. And then I launched into 2023. After 1 month, began to finally take creatine. I've heard about it, but mostly because of Huberman Lab and because this made kind of this information accessible to me, I then decided to try to take creatine. So I began with 1 gram. And I took 1 gram for about a few weeks, and then I increased it to 1. So I actually did only begin with 1.25 grams. So I already tried to aim at 5 grams, but I wanted to see if there was a benefit. And even with 1.25 grams, so 1/4 of the actually standard recommended dose of 5 grams a day, I already began to see noticeable improvements in my running performance, and I also already began to see visual changes. First, after taking the creatine, so within 1 or 2 hours, my muscles would look as if they were full of glycogen, even though it is of course not glycogen but creatine then and water, and the water it draws into the muscles. But I mean, the effect was noticeable, and this is also when I first began to push through records in the gym again after years. Now, of course, there have been so what I have to mention with this is that before I began tracking my lifts at the gym again, I did have the impression that I have been plateauing for years. Basically, I had a session or a phase a few years ago where so basically I have never been in a commercial gym for a long period of time up until last year, or not last year, but 2022 in mid-year I began attending a commercial gym. Before I've only used a home gym, or I did attend like parkour parks and try to train there, or I trained just with body weight and so on and so forth. And because of this, I could standardize my weight training, I could improve my weight training, I could use all of these different machines and basically have access to them. I then also switched to morning workouts, which also seems to have had a big impact. Now, regarding my VO2 max again, I noticed that I basically became a better runner on creatine. And because I now am a better runner, or I at least, it's not that I am really a better runner, it's just that the creatine seems to have pushed my running times down. Now, if I, for example, in the beginning of 2022 ran on average a 6-minute pace per kilometer. Then what creatine would do, it would push this 6 minutes per kilometer down to 5 minutes and 30 seconds per kilometer, or even sometimes approaching basically 5 minutes per kilometer, something that was kind of unheard of, at least in my mind, even like a couple of weeks or months before. So I got my Garmin watch in 2022, in early 2022, basically in the beginning of the year, in February, and then I had access to VO2 max, so basically to a metric that is VO2 max. Before, in Samsung, it showed up in particular runs that actually hit this threshold of being basically on one level and then for a certain duration. And because I now had access to this metric, it also became kind of accessible to me. And so I, over the course of 2023, was able to push my VO2 max slowly, not so big pushes, but mostly the creatine has been probably a push. But maybe because of the creatine I was also more consistent with training, or maybe because the training was more consistent, I actually did progress even with with a given level of willpower. I think creatine gives me, at least in my experience, gives me basically the ability to perform better. And this is so noticeable that, for example, yesterday, I decided to increase creatine again to 10 grams. I had to stop it in late 2023, so basically late last year, and I had to stop it and temper it down for a couple of months actually, and I really noticed this. Because previously I was kind of on creatine, as I might describe this, at least to me. Now, because I was off creatine, and because so for the last month I took 5 grams again, and before that I actually had a lower dosage. And now on the 10 grams, so yesterday was the first day I took 10 grams, and I slept well this night. And then today I was able to run. So what felt like a very bad run turned out to be a run that was, at least compared to the last runs I did, not that bad. And now there are also lots of other factors, such as my other training loads, such as the things I do during the day, and so on, and the stress level, and then the sleep, and so on and so forth. One factor I want to acknowledge, so there are 2 maybe additional factors: nutrition and sleep. Now, I want to maybe for now at least exclude the other factors, because I mean, at which point does it make sense to discuss all of these different things, and the video only can be so long, and only I could show a lot of graphs, but this is not this video. So back to sleep. I try to sleep for 4 hours a night and then 2 hours during the day for quite some time. I also then tried 4 hours plus 2 hours plus additional naps. I also then tried 6 hours. So this was basically in the middle of last year already. I tried to sleep 6 hours a night because I noticed that it probably was not wise to continue to try to sleep this little. If all the sleep trackers and everybody else basically seem to nudge me towards something else. So if basically the average human cannot survive, or not cannot survive, but cannot function optimally with 6 hours of sleep, then probably I also can't, and I am not one of the tiny percentage that can, or of the tiny portion of people that can actually properly function well on 5 or 6 hours of sleep. So I began also because I had another health issue, where Inside Tracker also said a recommendation for getting rid of this health issue would be to try to sleep an average amount in between 7 to 9 hours. In the middle, it's 8. So I slept a lot longer. I basically slept sometimes a ridiculous amount of hours in my, at least, eyes and in my perception. But this seemed to really help my recovery. So after I slept a little bit longer, then often what would happen is that I would have a really good training session, and this could be either a run, this could be also at the gym, this could be also somewhere else. And because of this, I think I progressed a little further. And then there had been this additional issue. So basically, the improved sleep covered kind of the lack of creatine and maybe of other things I I took, so mostly the creatine has probably been the impact. I mean, what other things did I take? A multivitamin and curcuma or turmeric. Now, these had been kind of the things I actually, and omega-3 fish oil. And I also had to stop omega-3 fish oil, but yeah, well, probably had not the biggest impact on my training performance, but maybe on my sleep, maybe on my brain function, and then my brain function led to a better cognitive control during training, and so on and so forth. And well, I actually wanted to show the superior thing on the video on the watch, and that it now has a different color. And I also wanted to acknowledge this point in time at least, because maybe it's gone in the next run. So it's 55 still, but Garmin not only has these rounded numbers of 55, but it also has these other numbers, and these other numbers, they have been going slightly up. So my VO2 max, also shown in Garmin Connect on the web, is also still 55, but somewhere in there, I think it's on the mobile app, there is actually it actually shows also the decimal points. So it's the threshold for me, for my particular age group, and I don't know what else is calculated into the VO2 max, into the VO2 max table that is then used to determine whether yours is excellent. So mine was excellent before, and now it is superior, which is obviously nice, at least for me. And I've been looking forward to this moment. I figured it would have been, it would have increased more, but it didn't, and it's a slow thing, especially since I only run like once a week, and this is mostly determined by runs, so I only have one data point a week, and then I have one VO2 max for the week, which is also kind of nice, because then it's like a weekly measurement, basically. So what I wanted to do is to try to go into the now Garmin Connect app and see if VO2 max in there is shown with decimal points. And because the decimal points, so the decimal threshold was actually 55.5 or 55.6, and it has shown 55 for now several weeks to months even, and it seems to also not show them in here. But somewhere in Garmin Connect I saw them, I just cannot figure out where exactly it was. Sometimes, so on the watch actually it shows you a graph, but this graph doesn't have any numbers on it, so you cannot properly see it. So this is what it shows in the performance thing, and the performance thing I set onto the 5K, because that's the one that I usually do. I try to aim at a 5K. It's still not sharp. Maybe now it's sharp. Nope. It doesn't do anything at all. Now, it was sharp for like a moment, but it's now not again. So this is what the performance tab in Garmin shows. It shows that it is now in the purple area. Before it was in the well, it is probably blue area. I have all screens set to grayscale, so I didn't see it, only on the watch itself. And then if you go into training status, then you can see that it is now in the other area as well, and it shows superior now. And there is also a graph, so it shows VO2 max superior. And it previously already was into the zone, and was kind of verging into the zone. And there is also this graph on here, but I don't know where exactly I saw these point values. Maybe they're also gone because I'm enrolled in the beta program, and so maybe based on your running trend, your VO2 max is steady, and it showed this for weeks now. I also have been on increasing in the last year, but not this year, so not 2024 already. And that's kind of what it shows, and that's kind of what I have been doing. I've been trying to improve my sleep, and it actually really has been showing. So whereas before I got a sleep score often of like 20 or 50 or up to maybe 65 for 6 hours of sleep that were kind of optimal with fasting before and so on and so forth. Now I get, even on Garmin, which seems to be a little bit lower in terms of the sleep score usually, even on Garmin, for example, for the last night, I got an 82. And this means that on average now, I have kind of a sleep score that is maybe 60, not 60. On Garmin, let's say, it is now 70 to 80, and on Samsung Health, it's usually above 80. And that's kind of ridiculous to me, because I had really bad sleep scores, and all the time, all these sleep trackers would say like my sleep is really bad, and so on and so forth. Even though sometimes it actually was quite good, and it has been kind of refreshing. But as I try to improve my sleep and also my performance in general, not only my physical but also my mental performance, I try to again look at sleep, and also read Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep Again, and it just seemed obvious that I probably wasn't the outlier that only could survive on 6 hours of sleep, so I cut it short, and I now sleep about 6. I basically go to bed earlier, 2 hours earlier, and I go to bed at 10 and wake up at 6, because that's also the schedule that has been kind of probably, or it has the biggest overlap with the overall population. And there are also like law regulations that actually, or there are laws actually that say, okay, from this time to this time you have to be quiet in your house, for example, and these are kind of these times, going to bed at 10 and waking up at 6. And also over the time of the year, it seems that this is a reasonable schedule, because it allows you to not have to go, or not to have to wake up that early compared to when the sun rises in winter. And well, I also tried exposing my eyes and my skin, maybe not my skin mostly, I tried to expose my eyes more to the sun, also Huberman Lab recommendation, and I actually implemented it, and I also was able to track it within the last weeks with this watch now, because before I didn't have a way to track sunlight exposure, but now with the Solar Ring and the Garmin Solar Intensity, that kind of lets you approximate light exposure, even though it is only measuring the light that hits your wrist, but it probably hits it, is a better approximation of this compared to, well, nothing. And so I've been using this, and this might also have been contributing to my sleep. I have been tracking my sleep on this watch and also on this watch. I usually kind of rely more on the sleep tracking on the Samsung Galaxy. But also, if one is really off and has a really bad sleep score, for example, and the other one is not, then I can see, okay, the other one is not. And that usually, and if both have kind of the same trend, then it says that probably was a good night of sleep. Then there is also the subjective measurement, or you could also have a subjective measurement. I also have been recently trying out an app called Bearable, which would potentially allow to take different variables and then to kind of see if there are correlations between those variables. But one problem with this app is that it doesn't import a lot of data, so most of it seems to be subjective data, and then you can include factors like, okay, I slept on this mattress today, and I slept with a tilted window in this night and on this night not, and then you can see whether it had a positive or negative impact on your sleep. But the sleep measurement or the sleep outcome is kind of it's kind of a measurement that is subjective, so you can rate it from 1 to 5, and that's kind of the output you give the sleep. And it doesn't basically take the sleep scores from Samsung Health and then transfers it to Google Fit, and then Google Fit into Bearable. This would also have been nice. So now I'm still really bad at running, I would say. I mean, I also now have not the best and the ideal runner form, probably not in terms of running, but just in terms of, well, what I'm trying to say is that this is maybe just the first step into basically trying to, of course it's not the first step, it's just a continuation of this process. And last year, for example, I think I hit every single workout. On every single day I worked out for at least 20 minutes. That's kind of the limitation or the rule I have set up for myself, and I followed the schedule I had set up basically as strictly as not the years before, even though the years before I also have been pretty strict. What also has been noticeable is that I now have data. I increasingly with the Garmin watch, but also with the Galaxy watch already before, and also with other services like I got my blood drawn for the first time for a kind of just once a year was the thing is the thing I'm now trying to do, to get a few markers measured once a year. I also got my bio age this year, or last year actually. So in December I got my bio age, which was I think 36, and I'm 28, so it's not that great. But well, what I'm trying to say here is that it has been really helpful to concentrate on a few things that have been really helpful. What I'm trying to say is that relying on services that actually give you kind of objective data, whether this is my performance in the gym, okay, I'm lifting this amount, and if I try to get the exercises down and I do the same routine 3 times a week. It's exactly the same routine, and I do it again and again and again. It's a benchmark. Every routine, every exercise is basically a benchmark. Every run is a run. So there is kind of the difference. There is kind of the difference between race and also between exercise. But if you take a closer look and if you track everything, then everything is already kind of, it's basically going, both are kind of merging into one. The exercise and the race, or the exercise and the performance. If you think about a musical performance, for example, if you try to approach everything with the high intensity of, okay, this is recorded, therefore this is part of my journey, therefore this is not just an exercise session I won't remember in 3 weeks, but it is remembered. Even though, for example, no, not even though, but I sat in a sauna, for example, today, and I have fasted before, so I didn't eat, and then I did my run today, which actually gave me this reading. And now I have a superior VO2 max. Even though I felt the run was really bad, it still gave me this, and this is probably because I felt it was really bad, but the creatine just pushed it onto a level that it was an average pace of 5:30 per kilometer, which is not that good, but it allowed me, the creatine seems to just allow me to run faster, and even my subjective measurement seems to lag behind this kind of. I don't, so basically, sometimes I do have a creatine boost for the first 20 minutes, and then I can run really fast, and then it goes down, and then I probably go into glycogen, and then I probably go into fat burning. If the run is really long, as I become more and more glycogen depleted in my legs, and also my ligaments start to hurt, my ligaments and tendons start to hurt. But I'm proud about this. I wanted to make a video about this just to talk to myself in the future, and now it's also probably soon on the internet, and well, maybe I can increase my VO2 max even more, but at least I'm now in the superior VO2 max zone, which means I'm in the same kind of level as Peter Attia, who also has a superior VO2 max.